Thank you for joining us for our monthly webinar series from Local Market Monitor, where we take a closer look at this month's National Economic Outlook, which was written by Local Market Monitor's founder, Ingo Windsor. For those of you that don't know Ingo, he's been analyzing real estate markets for over 30 years and is a graduate of MIT and Boston University. He is not your typical economist and has a knack for taking complex data, extracting what is important, and providing unique insights and tangible guidance on real estate markets. So with that, I bring you Ingo and his insights on the economy.
Thanks very much, Carolyn. Every month, we look at the latest economic data to see what they can tell us about real estate markets, where they are now and where they may be headed. Our underlying premise is that you make better investment decisions when you have a better idea of the economic forces that affect supply and demand. This month, we'll first check on the overall economy, then the job situation, and then some details about the healthcare sector, which has been providing a lot of new jobs in the past year. First, here's a picture of the broadest measure of economic activity, real gross domestic product. It's called real because it's adjusted for inflation. You'll note on the left that I've cut off the actual drop of the economy during the COVID shutdown, which went down to minus 30%. In the first quarter of this year, the annual rate of growth was 1.6%, lower now for several quarters. But GDP fluctuates a lot, so we don't know if that's a bad omen. By the way, I've often wondered how you can accurately measure something as big as the US economy to within 1/10 of 1%. Now let's look at jobs, our best short-term indicator of how the economy is doing. Here's a picture of the monthly increase of jobs in the economy. In April, the increase was about 175,000 jobs. It always sounds good to say how many new jobs were created, but this way of looking at jobs doesn't tell us much about what we can expect in the future. The numbers change so much from month to month that it's tough to spot any trends. Here's another way of looking at those same numbers: the percent increase in jobs every month compared to the same month of the previous year. Here we can see that the trend over the past 18 months has been from higher to lower growth, as rehiring for jobs lost during the pandemic first surged and now has slowed. The growth rate right now is very close to 2%, but there are reasons to think that the trend hasn't stopped yet. Let's look a bit closer to see exactly which sectors of the economy have been producing those new jobs. In the manufacturing sector, we see that job growth is now at 0. This is pretty surprising because we've been hearing that companies will bring back jobs from overseas, but maybe that just takes a while and that'll happen eventually. In the retail sector, there's been very slow growth. And the same in the finance sector, where job growth now is below 1%. The construction sector is doing well as a whole, but home builders have been laying people off for the past year, and most of the growth is in non-residential construction, like data centers. My biggest worry comes from the business services sector, the largest sector of the economy, which provides services like lawyers, accountants, and office cleaning that all other businesses need. It's our best measure of real business activity, and it's now growing at just 0.5%. One reason for that is big layoffs of temporary contract workers, who could be anything from file clerks to software engineers. Businesses like to hire temporary workers when business is good and fire them when it's not. And for more than a year now, they've been firing them at a very high rate. Now let's look at the 3 sectors that have provided most of the recent new jobs. Most restaurants closed during the pandemic, then reopened and rehired when it was over. The level of job growth at restaurants before the pandemic was around 2%, which is where we are right now. Jobs in government usually increase less than 1% a year, but have recently grown at a 3% annual clip. The main reason is rehiring at the state government level. This isn't really new hiring, it's just restocking. And once those old jobs have been filled, growth in the government sector will revert back to 1% or even less. Something similar is happening in the healthcare sector, although there may be more to it than that. In normal times, jobs in this sector increase at about 2% a year, but that rate right now is well above 4%. This is what's keeping the national growth rate at 2%. And the big question is whether we're seeing restocking that will soon come to an end or actual changes in healthcare practices as a result of the pandemic experience. At nursing homes, where jobs are increasing at a 5% rate, I'm pretty sure we're seeing restocking. Many nursing homes were ravaged during the pandemic, and many of them shut down. The industry was still shedding jobs in early 2022, and in a sense, it's been starting over. But when the old jobs are refilled, we'll see growth in this part of healthcare go back to 1% a year. On the other hand, it seems likely that home healthcare will be a bigger part of healthcare in the future. In part, that's because it's cheaper than being in a hospital or nursing home, and in part because people found during the pandemic that a lot of conditions don't need hospital care. So this part of healthcare probably will grow at a high rate for a while. But overall, when only the healthcare sector is adding a meaningful number of jobs, it's very likely that the national economy will keep slowing down, which in turn means lower demand for housing and downward pressure on home prices. That's it. In this time of uncertainty, it's important for bankers and investors to stay on top of local economic and real estate developments. Local Market Monitor provides the data and analysis they need with local market reports and investors' metro analysis. Thanks very much for following along. This is our National Economic Outlook. I'm Ingo Windsor.